So just a few thoughts thinking about the incident huddles that we run on the unit, how we might get some guidance together for facilitating those. So I'll run through a couple of things. I'm sure I won't remember to cover everything, but the things looking at is how it might be similar or different to other things that are run on the unit and how you might connect those up. The tasks involved with setting it up and facilitating it and the responsibilities linked with it. And then I guess also thinking about some facilitation guidance for how you actually run the session. So first things first, how is it similar or different to other things? So the other things that might be similar are debriefs for incidents, series, and reflective practice. So unlike a series, the incident huddle is not about really getting into the nitty-gritty with a view to understanding who went wrong and where does responsibility for that sit and what needs to be done. So it is not a deep probing and in terms of understanding what went wrong to that depth. It is not the same as a debrief, which maybe focuses much more on the impact of staff and the well-being of staff. And it is not in the same way as reflective practice, focusing on staff learning from how they experience their work. It's maybe a bit more practical than that. So I would say it's got elements of all three, and sometimes it depends a little bit on the nature of the incidents as to whether it steers a little bit more into the practical or a little bit more into staff support. It may well indicate that one of the outcomes is that some of those channels could be beneficial to use for one of these incidents that we get discussing. So thinking about the practicalities of it, we had been running them with both wards joining. The benefit of that being is that sometimes in terms of innovating, creating, thinking of different ways of looking at it, having both wards present has made that really helpful. Because we have a long history of the wards having been mixed sex prior to 2015, often people would be aware and know individuals involved, so also could bring useful insights. I would certainly say it is helpful when we have a member of the nursing team, as in a nurse and a nursing assistant. So they have different roles, they will be involved in the work, coming at it from different angles, and will be able to offer different solutions. So really good to be able to get people there from both. Tend to run it for an hour during protected time at a time that suits both wards. In terms of what do we need to do, so it's helpful that people know in advance so that they can plan into the diary for who's going to attend. And what people need to bring with them is a printout of the week's incidents. So incident reports are generated, so have those printed to bring with. What it means is that the people that are coming to the incident huddle don't need to have been involved in the incidents that have happened. So we have that information with us. It's great if there've been a few incidents, if people have had time to sift through them, because quite often it may theme into one particular individual and there may be a few related incidents or one particular theme and a few things relating to that, so that we start to generalise, because we won't have time to go through everything. But appreciate that the wards, are really busy spaces. So if that hasn't been done beforehand, we maybe just spend the first couple of minutes going through that in the beginning. The responsibilities of the facilitator are to take a few notes. So I will send some email examples of the depth of notes that I take. So this is not about minuting everything, but just about grabbing a bit of context. People can go back and read the incident form if they want to, but a bit of context around what was happening. And the main thing is, what are the actions? So the responsibility after the session is to type a quick email. Again, I'll send the format that I use and send that to the clinical managers, and it will then get discussed in the weekly clinical managers meeting. Now, what that does is ensure that the conversations that happen at the incident huddle go somewhere concrete for actions to get carried forward. It is not the responsibility of the people in the room to pick up actions necessarily, or they may say, actually, that's something I can do, I'll send that email. So it might be about thinking, well, that would be for the band sixes, or that's for ward managers, or that's to go to the clinical managers, or to be decided. So it's about allocating tasks to someone, but it may not always be the final person that ends up doing or taking on an action. So when you're in the huddle itself, I always start off with, have people been before and do they know what it is? Helpful to start with that, because if people haven't been, it can be a little bit intimidating and people aren't sure what's expected of them. So lots of, I guess, permission giving that this is a really creative space. This is thinking about learning and how we can at least take something from when incidents have happened. What can we take from them to either prevent similar incidents happening, or what maybe have we learned about working with or supporting someone that we can carry forward, so that we're generating gains, generating benefits, generating better ways of working all the time. The more that we have the huddle running, the more I found that people became less suspicious of what it was all about, that it's not about fault finding, not about getting people into trouble, and it really is actually about an opportunity to think, how could we do this better? How could we do this differently? So as you're going through incidents, if there are both wards, we tend to alternate one between the other. I guess asking people to focus on the incidents that they think that would be most useful to focus on first, because if there's things that are quite juicy, it might be that we only move through a couple of incidents in a huddle. So asking the wards to think about where they want to start and just roll with that. When you come to it, I guess people first need to read out a bit about the incident and what happened. Don't need to necessarily read it all out, but just so that everyone in the room is aware enough of what happened in the incident. Then as you're talking it through, people might add more detail. I say they may or may not have been involved in the incident, but most people are aware of what's happened. And then it's thinking about what can we take from that. So sometimes it's thinking at an individual level. Has this highlighted or showing a particular gap in the care plan, or a way that we could support someone differently? Does this maybe show that there's an opportunity to have a different conversation with someone around something? We don't necessarily generate solutions, we might generate more questions or things to follow up at the individual level of supporting someone. Sometimes it highlights more staffing type issues, in which case it's thinking about, sometimes things happened that as a result of who was there, or how many were there, or what else was going on the ward, or practical things, about where items are located, or practical ward-based stuff. And those could be about then thinking, are there ways that it could be done differently? Pinging those ideas either forward to the clinical managers to think about, or had to be put on a staff meeting agenda to be discussed more widely within the team. So we're always thinking about the levels of learning. It might be that we need to push things up higher again, and thinking about conversations that could be planned to be taken forward to clinical managers and locality management level. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're saying that has to be done, but just thinking about who are the appropriate people to be inputting to this, and suggesting that those conversations and trying to support those conversations in any way that we can. Sometimes an incident, it is just about saying, do you know what? Given what happened, it couldn't have been predicted, it couldn't have been foreseen. It was something that happened. Actually, although not ideal, it was handled the best way that it could have been handled. The person, everything that was done to support the individual, support the staff, actually went really well, in which case your action is to feed back to the clinical managers how to recognise the people involved in that, or to praise, or to think, how do we learn and replicate more of this? What was it about that was particularly helpful? So we're not just learning from difficult things, we're also thinking about what are the bits that were really good and how do we carry that best practice forward. Your role as the facilitator is how to try and open it up. So sometimes when facilitating, you will get, I guess, what can we learn from this? And maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure. Not really find that it's coming with a lot of ideas. And that's often because, people have been bouncing through their shift. They've just come out off the ward to come and sit in this meeting. And now it's a real change of gear. And sometimes that doesn't necessarily set people up to thinking about I don't know, the possibilities of how we might learn, how we might do things differently. So it's how you can help open up with the use of questions. So not short fire questions in an interview type style, but just thinking about, okay, so what went well? What would we do the same again? What might we do differently? Was this predicted? If a similar situation arose, do you think it would go the same way again? Is there something about this day or working with this person that influenced the outcome of that? So all of those kinds of things that just get people talking and thinking. And sometimes it highlights ideas about resources, simple ideas, ways of working, people stepping up into different roles, all that kind of stuff. If nothing else, I think people have always seemed to enjoy being asked how to think about, based on your exposure, based on your experience to this, how can we do it better? And it seems to create quite a positive experience, I hope, a positive experience for people to think about. We are really open to always thinking, how can we do it better? And that's, I guess, the temperature of what you're trying to create in the room. So it's about creating a psychologically safe space where there are no daft questions to be asked, there are no suggestions or ideas that are too small, and just how you make that a really welcoming discussion. In terms of then outcomes, the main thing I would say is that we channel it through the clinical managers meeting. You do that by emailing it to the notes to the clinical managers and copy in the people that were present in the room so that they see where that follow-on has gone. So as I say, I'll send a couple of examples, but the main role in facilitating it is to try and just get a really open-minded space where we start to think about opportunities to learn how to do things differently, based on the fact that this has been an incident where clearly, by virtue of the fact that it's been recorded as an incident, it didn't quite go how we may have ideally liked. So facilitating that conversation, if it's wrapped up and it's done, don't try and drag it out. If people are done, they're done. But I think if it feels like you do a few and they're going quite quickly, thinking how you can expand the conversation, how you can open it up. It's sometimes the mix of people, and sometimes having a more senior staff member has been really helpful because perhaps they see a bigger piece of the picture, a bigger piece of the jigsaw, or feel like actually there's more permission to come up with options for doing things differently. So it's a really useful space, and one that I think isn't fulfilled by any of the other mechanisms that we offer on the unit. Yeah, give it a go, and I'm open to any feedback or any further questions.